Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, a podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. And now your host, David Ginsburg.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Tales from the Fandom. And I am super excited to have this guest joining me today for your listening pleasure. If you have been following my Twitter account at all for the past month to 2 months, you will routinely see me tweet every morning about coming to join Hyrule Gaming Group on Twitch for a very positive vibes Twitch stream, whether he's playing Animal Crossing, whether he's playing Stardew Valley, or any number of the Legend of Zelda games that he has been rocking. I am happy to have Josh, aka HylianDescent, or Hyrule Gaming Group, to the podcast today. Welcome, sir, to the podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
I am excited to have you. It's something where you get onto Twitch early in the morning, and there's not a lot of people on. Most of the people are streaming in the afternoon or the evenings, and I think it was just one of those recommended channels, and I saw that you were playing Animal Crossing of all games, and I had to join. I love Animal Crossing and your community, and you in particular. When you say positive vibes, you mean the positive vibes, and the community is just an amazing group of people supporting each other and just being there for each other. And there's no words.
Oh my goodness. Well, I definitely appreciate those kind words, or the lack of their being there. But it's kind of sprouted into its own thing. I can't say a word about it. It's the community. It's not me.
Well, we'll definitely be talking about it later on in the episode. But I did want to get started with one of your quotes that you always say, and it leads us in perfectly to our first topic, is that you're like an 80% Nintendo baby with a 20%. 80% Nintendo baby, 20% variety streamer at heart. That's accurate, right?
Yeah, very accurate.
And so you play a lot of video games. I mean, you play a core 3-ish, give or take, on the stream that I've been able to watch so far. But you have a gamut of video games. So I guess my first question is, well, where did you get started with video gaming? Do you remember like your first console, your first video game?
Oh my goodness. I definitely do, actually. My very first console and video game was Sonic the Hedgehog 2 on the Sega Genesis.
I remember that. I remember it because I was a Nintendo person to begin with. I had my original Nintendo, and then it was one year for Christmas, like the Super Nintendo was out, and then the Genesis was coming out, and all the hype, especially with Sonic 2, is like, not only do you get to play Sonic, but you get to play with two people playing at the same time, which was mind-blowing for a kid like me at the time.
Oh, I can only imagine. I was actually 3, so it was a little bit of a different experience. The fact that I even remember it, I feel like, is a testament to my passion for games, because I don't remember much from that age. But I remember the first time I picked up those sticks. The gift was from my brother, and he unwrapped it, and we got the Genesis with the not for resale Sonic 2, the package. You know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
And it was just fate. I picked up that blue hedgehog, and I fell in love.
When you since you started out you started out in the 16-bit era. What games do you generally find yourself drawn to nowadays, like as far as it being a gamer?
I think it does show where I came from. I kind of feel like you were kind of alluding to that. And it's funny because I go to the platformers still. I go to the challenge gaming. If I can't make the game harder for myself somehow, or if the challenge isn't already there in some sort of like puzzle form or time management form, that usually gets me, the time management games. Mm-hmm. And I can maybe even go towards something like the platformer, something that takes reflexes and some sort of quote unquote skill, if you will. I don't, for lack of better terms.
Which are some of your favorite of those platformers that you enjoy?
I go towards, I still play the Mega Mans, the Marios. I still do the 2D platforming as well as the 3D. I guess stuff like Starbound, I would consider in that area, as far as the 2D platformers, and then of course the 3D being the modern day Mario's, the modern day Mega Man's. I just finished Mega Man 11 not too long ago. It's been about 4 months now. So I still definitely go in that direction, but my gaming has evolved for sure. I'm a real heavy RPG fan now. Very, very heavy RPG fan. Wasn't into them as a kid. That wasn't my first. I've probably only played 2 Final Fantasies in my life. So I feel like that says a lot for my gaming style. I was always going towards in the other direction. And eventually I also started playing simulators. That is the big one now. If it's not a farming simulator, it's a life simulator. You know, the Animal Crossings, the Harvest Moons. But it's kind of evolved. It's kind of cool to think about where I've come from and where I'm at now in my gaming.
For platformers specifically, I know you play on stream. You play a lot of Legend of Zelda.
Right.
Are you like the Zelda? Like, do you turn to that game more often than not, just because there is just so much in the Zelda world?
I could say that's part of it, but I really am a Zelda freak. I really am. I know I started off on those platformers, those, like I said, the Sonic the Hedgehogs, the Mega Mans. I mean, I was the Mega Man kid in my crew. So we had a Metroid kid, we had a Mario kid. I was the Mega Man kid. But as far as Zelda, that relationship didn't really truly kindle until the Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance era. And I fell deep. I fell deep for the over-the-top 2D Zeldas. And it sprouted into a love that Legend of Zelda is definitely my favorite series. Definitely my favorite franchise, I guess.
Okay. What is it about the Zelda franchise that draws you in, especially because each of the games seems so different, with the exception of like Majora's Mask and Ocarina of Time, because they both were on the 64. But each game just feels like its own entity, almost akin to like Final Fantasy and role playing, but Zelda with like the action RPG style game.
I like that. And then they do feel different. There's like a few things that bring them all together, a few points that you could say every Zelda kind of hits, which is why, side note, that's what made Breath of the Wild such a hit or miss for some people. I know it was very popular for most, but some Zelda fans didn't like it as much because it didn't have some of those points we all look for. Things like elaborate dungeons, and I can imagine there was a few other little details people were looking for that weren't all the way there, or they were kind of harder to find. But to answer your question, for me, it was the puzzles. It started off with the puzzles. It having your mind bent the way that a Zelda game doesn't happen often in gaming. Back then it didn't, and it doesn't happen nowadays either. They're the kings of their style puzzles, Zelda puzzles. They're different. I don't know if you can agree, but they're different than any other game I've played. Zelda puzzles are their own thing, and that's what really got me going.
For me, as far as Zelda goes, like I have a very interesting like background on it, because the original system I grew up on was the original Nintendo Entertainment System, and I've tried Zelda back then, like the original Legend of Zelda, and I could not get into it, and I became more of the Final Fantasy type person, playing where it's, I have my time to think and do my actions and explore and go through the dungeons and random encounters. And even with the advent of how Zelda's evolved, it's still more of that action RPG style. And for some reason, I don't connect with it. But the thing that I've loved is on Twitch, I've been able to watch you and other streamers play the Zelda games, and I enjoy the heck out of watching people go through those dungeons, go through those puzzles, do the action RPG element, to the point where, like, I'm standing on the precipice of maybe I will pick up Breath of the Wild as my first Zelda game, because number one, it's a beautiful game. Like, beautiful. The graphics on it are wonderful, but I think I could play it in a way where even like the action RPG elements would be secondary to like just going around and adventuring and seeing what I can find in this world.
Oh yeah, I think you can. My first playthrough of Breath of the Wild was, I called it the pacifist run. I wouldn't fight a thing because I was scared and I was playing on master mode. But that's different. That's I wouldn't fight a thing. I was a pacifist, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the game, so I think you could pull that off.
So, but and now you said you're getting into like some of the RPG type games as you've gotten older. Do you have ones that you connect with more, or is it more like action RPG style games?
Definitely, the action has stuck with me. I think that's one of the things that separated gaming for me as a kid was keeping my attention. I think the action RPGs always kept me going. To be able to blend my reflexes with my brain was what I think I look for. And as I got older, I picked up Tales of Symphonia. I like to note that game. And I picked it up as a kid, and it was the first time I ever appreciated an RPG, a true, in its right RPG game. But if you know anything about the Tales of Symphonia game, similar to the Star Ocean games, they have an ARPG battle system.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I rarely strayed away from that combat, that style, that ARPG style. So I would like to note that game. And I've tried other RPGs, but they ended up being MMOs. And that's where I was going with that. MMO RPGs, where there is still a sense of action RPG, were really, really the RPGs that I started getting into outside of the Zeldas. I even started going towards, or I even stepped back towards like Neverwinter Nights.
Mm-hmm.
And the Dungeons and Dragons style, a little faster paced than your standard JRPG or Final Fantasy, but almost like the middle ground between the two. So
right,
I never really came to full terms with the classic RPG. It's kind of funny that you asked me that, and I realize that now.
it's definitely I think at times I think there's just a divide on people that get into like that traditional RPG style game where it's the slow methodical game, like especially now, like we're talking in September, and we're on the cusp of having Final Fantasy VII come out again. Now, I played Final Fantasy VII back on the PlayStation, and like I dug it because it was that traditional RPG style, and now they're re-releasing it and they're doing it more out of a almost an action RPG style game, and it's definitely one where I'm like, okay, I love what they've done with the graphics, I love what they're doing with it, but it's a game where I don't feel I'd be able to play it as well as a traditional one. And it's interesting that that they've gone that route versus just sticking with what they did previously.
I agree, and I actually didn't know that. I haven't seen much about the Final Fantasy VII, but that kind of blows my mind that they would flip the script, if you will, on the community. That's pretty crazy to me. Really trying to bring life into the series, which I like that. I'm glad they're not afraid to mix things up, but that might, like you said, that could be a little weird for your traditional gamer there, your traditional RPGer.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, until this conversation, I guess I never realized that. I'm even thinking of other RPGs that I enjoyed, and I guess I get my methodical gameplay out of the grid-based strategies.
Mm-hmm.
Final Fantasy Tactics,
yeah,
Tactics Advanced were actually huge games in my life, and Fire Emblem. And I guess when we were thinking RPG, I was kind of overlooking those, but those are still traditional RPGs in their own right, and those games were probably where I got that slower, methodical gameplay fix, because I was playing Fire Emblem since I was a little kid, for sure. Sacred Stones, Game Boy.
And that's something I think, like, I missed out on that whole Fire Emblem series. I finally picked up Awakening for the 3DS, and it's still in the shrink wrap. I still haven't even opened it. It's like, okay, I have it now, but I don't have the time.
Yeah, those are long games. They're really good, especially the old ones. I know Awakening was solid. I enjoyed Shining Force as well.
Oh, that's classic.
Yes, those were the ones that got me started on the grid-based, and something about my brain just really clicks to those grid-based games. I don't know why.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that game in particular, I have a particular memory of playing it during a sleepover, and we had gotten really far, like leveled people up, and we're just continuing into the story. And then my friend had fallen asleep, and I was like, "Oh, I'm going to play my own game," and I saved over the file
Oh no.
and lost all of the progress from like the day before. It's like, no, like there's no way to get it back. Like we just had to redo everything.
Oh, depressing times in gaming. It's happened to all of us, I'm sure.
Yeah, I just let my kids, they started playing Stardew Valley on the Switch, and I said, make sure that you each have your own save file and you don't touch anybody else's.
Yeah, you gotta. I remember a really bad situation where I accidentally saved over my buddy's save file for a game on PlayStation called Champions of Norath.
Mm-hmm.
ARPG, Diablo 2 style game again. There's me. And I accidentally saved over his file, and I got so scared that I left the house. I left. I left. I went to the library. I was terrified. I was like, I don't know what to do. How do I break it to him? We spent weeks on that save file. It was bad.
Oh my gosh. What was the outcome to that? Like, what happened? I gotta know.
I mean, to be honest, the story's a little weird, but to really quick break into it, he found me outside that night, walking back home, looking for me. He didn't know I left, and he was really worried about me. And it was about 9:30 at night, and I was, like I said, I went to the library and I sat there. It was pretty close, about a block away. I came back, and as I'm walking up the driveway, he's outside looking for me, and I spook him. I spook him because he doesn't expect me to come creeping up the driveway. So we have this standoff moment where he's like, "Who is that? Yo, what are you doing in my driveway?" And I'm like, I'm sorry. And he's like, "Who are you?" Because I'm just saying I'm sorry over and over again. Because at this point I thought he realized that the save file was gone. And I'm bugging out because he said he was going to go play the game. In the end, he wasn't upset at all. But it was a really funny exchange in the driveway because he thought I was a madman. Walking up, I'm sorry, and just repeating it over and over. And I think we were probably 13. Something like that.
If you were going to recommend some games to somebody getting into gaming, whether it be like some of the bigger name platformers or the action RPG style games, or even like indie games, what would you recommend to people getting it, like just getting their foot into gaming?
I've never been asked that question before, actually. I would instantly go to the indie affordable titles like Stardew Valley, Starbound. Those are two similar games, but there's enough going on to where you would probably find enjoyment out of at least one of them. I would also go towards the stuff like Hollow Knight. And I can't remember the name, but it was Owlboy or something like that.
Yep, Owlboy.
There's a lot of games that have come out over these past 5 years that are gems. Celeste, that you can kind of really get a feel for gaming and like the roots of gaming, which is why I bring up those games. Because Stardew Valley comes in the roots of simulators. You have Celeste and Hollow Knight. Those are the roots of platformer games. And if I were to really step away from my own comfort zone, I would recommend trying some of the new FPSs. I'm not a big FPSer. I would try Fortnite for yourself. Try, and again, I'm looking for affordable games. I'm looking for games where you're not going to spend $60 on a Call of Duty and find out you don't like it. Because as a new gamer, you can run into a few traps. Nintendo lays them, Sony lays them, and they're very expensive traps to fall into. So I would recommend that indie catalog. It is gigantic. It is gigantic, and there's so many wonderful indie games. I support so many wonderful indie communities and companies. Subset Games, Faster Than Light, FTL, Faster Than Light. It's essentially a space Oregon Trail, and it's beautiful. If you're an older gamer who remembers games like Oregon Trail, you'll fall in love with Faster Than Light. And then you even have stuff like Into the Breach from the same company, grid-based strategy game where you're a bunch of mech suits fending off Earth from these crazy invading bugs. It's pretty cool stuff, though. It's very enjoyable.
Yeah, we kind of grew up in this in the same period of time as far as like the systems that we played and what we look for. And you bring up like the indie games that are really popular, like Shovel Knight and FTL and Stardew Valley. Do you think it's because for a certain section of us, we've gotten to the point where, you know what, graphics are fine. Like I'm fine with paying money for like a lot of these bigger games with the wonderful graphics, but deep down, like I want the story. I want the gameplay that I kind of reminisce about. And obviously like Nintendo and Sony are cashing in with releasing those retro consoles that we remember. But like these new games that are coming out that you talked about, they're really hitting that spot for people where like Stardew Valley was made by one person. Like it's just like, do you think that is it because like our generation, so to speak, is now in the position to make the games that we want to see or want to play, and we're like, you know what, as long as the story and the gameplay is good, like the graphics don't need to technically be there, or we use those graphics to really just have that nostalgia experience.
I think you hit the nail pretty right on point, pretty right on the head. I think there's a lot of us that are looking for that, whether to relive older experiences in a similar light, like in a fresh light, or I think there's also a little bit of timing. I think that over the past 5 years, I've watched gaming pretty closely for 20 years. Let's say 15, because I was a growing bean at that point. And watching gaming grow over 10, 15 years, we hit a good lull where about 5 years ago, I want to say there was a lot of similar stuff coming out from AAA companies. Now, of course, Nintendo has their niche games, their Marios, their Zeldas. You have Sony, who has their niche games. But everything that was coming out that was new was so similar. And I mean, I'll even poke at Breath of the Wild with the open world mechanic. And so many games were kind of falling in line. And then you would go and spend $15 on an indie game and put 300 hours into it. Stardew Valley for me. And it started waking me up. And I don't think I was the only one. I think over these past few years, people started waking up and realizing that you don't have to spend $60 to get a game experience. And in fact, sometimes you'll spend $60 and you'll get a worse experience than, or let's say, to not be negative about it, not as fulfilling of an experience as a $15, $20 purchase might have spent. And I think that the market started showing these games didn't get popular for no reason. And it caused a lot of weird stuff. Again, from a person who was able to watch the gaming front for 10, 15 years, I saw it and I feel like people got hungry for the story. Like you said, we no longer cared about the fat. We started trimming the fat off of our diet and said, we just want some good games. I think from an outward perspective, you would never expect Stardew Valley to be that good of a game. Would you agree? You not $15. The game looks kind of cheesy,
Yeah, it's got a level of play that you're not expecting from that kind of a game, because you're sold Stardew Valley as a simple farming simulator, not expecting to get like a dungeon crawl or a Harvest Moon style romance or the story that's involved in it. You aren't told any of that. You're just told farming simulator. That's the one thing I heard about that game for probably the first year or two.
Right. And there's so much more depth. It's before I even streamed the game, I gave the game 150, 200 hours of gameplay. And I can't say that about many games. I can't say that. I know I put that into Bethesda games, but that's expected. I've put that into Breath of the Wild. That's expected, but I spent only about 40 hours in the newest Kirby game on Nintendo. Again, not at all knocking the game, but just explaining that I spent $60 on 40 hours of an experience, but the same gamer was able to pull such an enriching experience out of a $15 purchase. But I feel like I've been bringing up money too much. It's not about how much you spend, because it isn't. I just like to bring that up as like an example of look at the gaming market. And I think this is why the indie games have started succeeding and becoming an even more sought after experience. Whereas when you go to spend that $60, you really are tied in. You're locking yourself in for something that you're gonna just hope is the best.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then, on top of that, you really know, like, when indie games have started making impact when you get ports to the consoles, or you get you get like the Switch. I remember when the Switch released, and you see all these indie games that you'd never heard about being available to download, and that's how I got Stardew Valley, was on the Switch just from the eShop. And I mean, it was just something I was like, I was told so many times that the game was great. I got it for the Switch. You see it available all over now.
Yeah, it's crazy, and even on mobile.
Yeah, I mean, mind blowing.
Yeah, didn't expect. Like you said, I like how we started that conversation, kind of, because one guy did that, and he's on every platform known to man. Making a happy little buck, in the words of Bob Ross, and now he has a team. It's crazy. It's crazy to think that, but I'm happy. I like that side of gaming. Like I said, I didn't want to be negative because I play AAA games. I'm right there with everyone, but I think it's a positive thing that we note that we acknowledge this indie market, because somebody said it in my chat once: indie revolution. Yeah. There's a freedom now. Game developers have a freedom, and that's cool. I think that's amazing.
It is, absolutely. And I feel, and we're going to get off the topic of video games in a moment, but I feel like when I buy a indie game, like, I feel, and again, this is tying into money, but I feel like I know exactly where my money is going and to who it's going to, versus I've bought the AAA title from one of the big companies, and I know that there's people, but they're employed. Like, they have that hourly, like, they get paid, salary or hourly, however they're getting paid, and they're like, they've already gotten paid for the work, and this is kind of just going in to recoup, like, the time and investment that they've made in the game, versus, like, this is putting money on the person who made this table, or this is helping with a college bill, something where it's like, I can tell that my money is going directly to those people that worked on that game, like, and invested their blood, sweat, and tears into it.
Right. I love it. I agree. It's a more intimate exchange. It really is.
Now, moving away from video games just for a little bit, because we'll get back to it when we talk about Twitch, of course, but one of the things that you said that is a really big passion of yours is music, and I'd love to know more about it, because everyone is completely different with music and musical tastes and styles and what they're into and what they're not. So I'd love to hear what your passion of music, like, where you fall for music and what you're into.
Well, kind of started for me from the little brother's perspective. I had an older brother who would feed me his favorite music, and I didn't really develop my own musical identity. I started off with, like, the Linkin Park and stuff like that, going through middle school, high school, and I slowly started turning my heads toward what I like to call traditional style hip hop. And boy, could I talk about this forever. I love my traditional style hip hop. I love it. I call it traditional style because it's still being done today, and a lot of people try to tag it old school. That's what you'll hear. You'll hear me even dropping a lot of old school artists. But for me, it's traditional style because there's still people doing it today, here, 2019. Probably just released an album last night. And they're still following those traditional rules of, we call it breakbeating, and, b-boys, and the different elements of hip hop. And if you're at all following, it was a very heavy thing. We had our golden era, which people say was 85 to 95. And that same style where they took the art of sampling, and they would take a record, and they would take a section of the record, and they would flip it or manipulate it to sound differently, slow it down, speed it up, cut it up sometimes and then turn it into something to rhyme over, to create poetry over. And that is the art of beating. And it all started, in the Bronx and in New York and way in the early 90s, late 80s, even early 80s, I'm sure, way before me. And since then it's evolved. And that's like the roots of my love for music. From there, it has gone far and beyond. I've become a lover of all different types of music, avid listener, everything from the roots of hip hop to jazz and all that stuff, and where hip hop started, a lot of that funk and jazz, and all the way to turning me to metal and progressive metal and music that is intricate and hard to play, and musicianship as a whole. So I've come a long way from that little kid who enjoyed his, Aesop Rock or Atmosphere. That was a big artist I loved as a kid. The very indie underground hip hop artist at the time. So, Deltron and like Ardell the Funky Homo Sapien was stuff we kind of grew up with in the early 2000s.
I love this question because it's always something that I think about when I think about music. You grew up under what your older brother listened to initially,
Mm-hmm.
and like I grew up with listening to whatever my parents used to have on. But then you get to that point where you're making your own money, and you buy that first CD. What was your first CD purchase that you made?
Good question. The first CD purchase I ever made could have very well been one of the first albums by P.O.D. I cannot remember the name of the album off the top of my head. I won't lie to you. I'd have to Google it. It was one of my favorite bands. Here's a good one, though, because I bought them together. Papa Roach's album that had the song The Last Resort on. It might have even been called The Last Resort. It was a very classic album. It had the song Blood Brothers on it from the Tony Hawk soundtrack. And I actually bought that Papa Roach album because of the Tony Hawk soundtrack. And it was just sick. It was the coolest song.
For what you call for traditional style hip hop, what drew you to the music? Was it, as you said, like the sampling that they did and how they twisted it and changed it for their music, or was it something entirely different? Was it like what drew you to that? So
for me, it's actually kind of hard to explain, because I really feel like I was drawn to the music in my soul. I'm not a superstitious human. You don't hear me talking about this much. I'm not religious. So I don't tend to go in that direction. I don't believe in like fate, if you're following that kind of stuff. But truthfully, the music just got all up in my soul. It wiggled up into my spine, and I fell in love so young. And I'll tell you, I figured it out as I gotten older. So jokes aside, the bass lines, the instrument, the bass, anything that has to do with the bass, and also add a little bit of percussion and drums, and you have me as a musical soul. And if you know much about hip hop, especially traditional style, it's bass and percussion. That's some of the main sources of music that you listen to.
For your music now, because you're an avid listener, you listen to everything from your traditional style hip hop to what you said, like metal, jazz. Is it more something where you're playing the music depending on your mood, or do you use music to change your mood? Or do you just like say, you know what, I'm going to just put this in and see where the music takes me, especially now in the digital age where we can just switch from one genre to another with the click of a button?
I like that point. And The digital age has definitely changed how I listen to music, but my favorite way to listen to music has always been full albums. Kind of like a quick note before I answer your question. I always appreciated the art of creating music in that sense and listening to it the same. From start to finish, first song of the album to the end, and maybe even spending a few minutes to reprise of silence, after you're done listening, to really soak it in. Because I feel some musical artists, maybe not all, understand that, and they're creating an experience. So to go in, I really listen to music for all those reasons. Every single one you just listed, and it's pretty cool to meet someone who clearly has a little bit of an appreciation. You seem like you do, because it's been a big tool in my life to help me get through hard times, to change my mood. Sometimes I want to match my mood. And I've learned over time it's not always smart to do that, because if you're in a depressed mood and you listen to depressed music, you just get more depressed.
Yep.
So I've learned that you got to switch it up. I use music as a tool, and it's helped me through thick and through thin. It really has. And now I'm a little bit more casual. I won't always be listening to music, but there was a point in time where I always had some sort of music playing in the background, and I loved it. It was my lifestyle. Whereas now, I don't do it as much. I don't do as much getting home from work, putting an album on, sitting and listening. That was an activity for me. I'd sit and I'd listen to an album, soak it in, listen to the lyrics, to the melodies, to the combination of the vocals with the instrumentations and how they sound over each other, and try to appreciate every bit of the music. And I used to tell people that, and they'd look at me with blank eyes. Like, you're not doing something while you're listening? And I'd say, no, that's my version of TV or reading a book. And that was a true appreciation that I've managed to just, like I said, I'm a little bit more casual. I've gotten busy. But that was all forms and all reasons of listening. I probably have used it. It took me years to even grasp that people listen to music for less than what I did. To reverse that, it took me years to understand that for some people, music is just noise. And that's never been that way for me. There's always a reason to put music on. And I think it took me years in my life to fully embrace that some people do not look at music that way. Not even close. They just just something they put on and they ignore, or whatever,
Yep. I want to circle back because you brought up an interesting thing, and I wanted to ask a question about it as far as it relates to music. You were talking about listening to an album from beginning to end, because when certain artists would make music, that would be like their thing, that like their album would tell a story from start to finish, or have a theme, or have something where everything's tied together. And you mentioned like the reprise, where maybe they'd circle back to like a snippet of song, like a bit of their music stylistically, like from their first song, and tie it into like their last song on the album. And I was curious because I've been out of music for a while, as far as like picking up anything new. It's very much I'm stuck in what I like, and I don't really stray from it too much. But I was curious, do you feel that that art of making an album where it's telling that theme or telling that story, do you feel like it's kind of gone away, and it's more that they're trying to like make a single that will hit and get them that popularity, or get them that recognition, rather than having the whole album telling the story?
I love that question. I think that it's definitely not as common. I think you have to work to find it, to find those people that appreciate making music that way. But it's definitely still there. And that's an answer just coming from my little bit of diving into the world of hip hop. And I've stretched into a couple other genres as deep. But when I say I dove into the world of hip hop and traditional style, I actually took 2 years off of gaming. The first time in my life, I was 24, and I decided that I had been gaming too much, that gaming was the only passion that I really developed in my life And I got scared or even worried that I was selling myself short of other passions. So I took 2 years off. And in those 2 years, I dove into the world of hip hop. It started off with just music, but I found a group of people. I still run with them today. Quick plug, Hip Hop Stacks. Find them on Facebook. You can find them on Instagram, Hip Hop Stacks. They are my crew. There's about 30, 40 of us internationally who all love hip hop the same way I do. And I found them diving into this culture. And I realized that it's exactly that. It's a culture. It's its own living and breathing thing. And when you really dive into the roots like that, you see music in a different way and you realize, oh, there's so much going on that I can guarantee you that whether it's punk, funk, jazz, pop music even, or pop style music, there's people out there that are respecting the art of making an album. Yeah, I bet you you'd be surprised how many people probably still are. But it's because you got to look for them. Sadly, you're right. Most people, especially if we know them at all, we probably know them because they're popular enough to be making money off of their music, and I feel like sometimes that'll change how you approach it once you really start making that happy buck.
As we wrap up music, and I'm just, if somebody's looking to get into some music, whether it be the traditional style hip hop or something else that like you really enjoy, like what would just be some recommendations of music that you would start people off with? Like, here's an intro to traditional style hip hop they'd be a good listen to, and then you'd find your way into that like genre of music or some other kind of music that you really feel like people could get like a taste of what to expect as they get into that genre.
Okay. Well, because I'm always mixing up what I'm listening to, I'll try to keep it to like 2 or 3 of my favorite styles of music. So for starters, we'll do hip hop. And one of my favorite parts of traditional style hip hop is the appreciation for lyricism and poetry. Okay. And an artist that really does that perfectly is a guy named A$AP Rock. He's actually my favorite artist of all time. I actually have one that I can choose. And it's AESOP, like Aesop's Fables, but A$AP Rock. And he is a lyricist through and through. I'm talking hundreds of words per song, thousands. And he's always telling some kind of story, whether it be some cheesy story about how he went to the coffee bar and got himself a juicy or whatever, to went to the juice bar, got himself a juice, and he's just telling a story about it, to telling a story about his life, in the past experience. He constantly throwing words at you and in such a poetic fashion that I feel like if you caught yourself at all enjoying A$AP Rock, if you dove a little bit deeper, you would see a world of lyricism that most people don't know exist. And I seriously mean that. I don't like to be over dramatic. Most people don't know that it's out there, that there's people that are telling these full, intricate stories through music and doing it so well, making it sound cool, fun. And another artist to really get you into traditional style hip hop on the other side of the coin, someone who's a little bit more chill, maybe a little bit more relaxed, would be one of my favorite artists, a guy named like Homeboy Sandman, where like Homeboy Sandman, that's right. And he is again a lyricist, but he's having a lot more fun. And it's a lot more intense, or less intense rather, excuse me. So instead of when you're going to listen to A$AP and you're struggling to keep up, Homeboy Sandman is having fun with words. He is playing with words while also delivering you something that sounds good to your ear. And it's really cool. I think it's two kind of opposites to the hip hop world, at least to my little nook of it. And then aside from that, I like to go into a lot of electronic stuff. One of my favorite artists we listen to a lot in the morning is Emancipator. And Emancipator is, I think, a really good introduction to just well-rounded electronic music, especially electronic music that kind of sets a tone for itself, that kind of has kind of almost speaks words through the music. I feel like not everyone really all the way can appreciate that. And if you find yourself appreciating non-lyrical music, just instrumentation, I would say try a little bit of Emancipator out. That's a genre I've been listening to a lot. And to kind of end this, it would be going towards like metal or punk rock. I'm going to kind of go towards the punk rock more, but Bad Religion is a very known artist. They've been around for a long time. And I think that they're a super awesome introduction to not only the punk genre and to a completely different style of music that I normally listen to or recommend, but the themes in punk go hand in hand with the themes in hip hop. And most people don't realize that those worlds blend so much, in fact, that a lot of punk heads love traditional style hip hop and lyrical based hip hop just as much as they love their punk music, because there's stories being told. There's points being made. They're bringing up topics that normal people don't like to bring up. For the example, the term I use is the message. The phrase I use is, a lot of the hip hop I listen to has the message. It's a very ominous way to say it's not afraid to touch topics that need to be talked about, whether it be problems at home or different problems in our country, in our society, things that people don't want to talk about. People don't even want to listen to in their everyday music. I think punk music does the same thing. So it would be the perfect thing to recommend, at least coming from this guy, because I love that those worlds mix and they sound completely different.
That is awesome. As a viewer of the stream, I can definitely vouch for Emancipator as being some really good music to listen to. And I know it's been called out a few times where people have joined the stream and all of a sudden they're like, hey, what's that music in the background? You always say like, oh, it's Emancipator, check them out, Emancipator. And it's definitely something where I can vouch for that music.
Yeah, I'm glad that people enjoy it, because that's, especially as I get older, as much as I am into lyricism, there's more times than not that I'm into instrumentals now, which is, I brought up the jazz, and I brought up that whole genre of music that I really fall into, that I love. And there's modern people out there that are doing, the jazz. It's not just the stuff that most people think of, which is like Coltrane and Miles Davis, and stuff like that. No. There's people, there's plenty of awesome jazz and instrumental music being made. A cool artist to kind of tip my hat to is Nujabes. It would be Nujabes. I never know how to pronounce it, but I bring him up, rest in peace, because Nujabes passed away, and they were doing this weird blend of electronics meets jazz meets hip hop. He made about 2 or 3 albums before he passed away, and a lot of them were collaborations with other artists, Japanese jazz artists, Japanese hip hop artists, and he created one of the most beautiful sounds you'll ever to come across in any genre of music. And I think it's a cool testament to that instrumental world. And then just every once in a while he throws lyrics, but most of his stuff is instrumental.
Oh, that's very cool. I'll have to check him out after we get done recording.
Yeah, I'd love to play more on streams if it wasn't for muted VODs. Oof.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And you bring up streaming, so that's a perfect segue here into what we're going to talk about as we wrap up the episode. Is, again, found you as a recommended channel, streaming on Twitch. It's been something that for the past year I've been getting into as more of a viewer. I stream very rarely at this point just because of work schedules and whatnot during the day. And of course, I did make the comment on Twitter, is that I'd love to stream more, but then me streaming would take away from me watching you streaming. And I enjoy what you bring as a streamer. So I've got to ask, how did you get into streaming?
I kind of enjoy this question, and I don't get it as much as you would think. And for me, it all started with stumbling across another stream that inspired me. And I even like to shout this stream out because their name, it wasn't the start of it, but it was really that pushed me over to the edge of saying that I'm doing this. And it was a guy named Future Man. And he's a partnered streamer. He's been around for a real long time. His name was Future Man, and he's on Twitch. And you can check him out. I would definitely recommend it. And he has this whole shtick where he's from the future to defeat video games from taking over the world. And it's beautiful. And so my journey on Twitch started off with just the thought that creating content would be cool. I realized that I wanted to do that with YouTube, Twitch, and Justin TV. Before Twitch, I was like, this is something I would enjoy. I'm a creative soul. And I saw an opportunity for me to get creative, and I wanted to take it. And it took years for me to stop procrastinating, to pull all the pieces together, to finally be pushed by getting inspired to another, or from another streamer. And then I finally took the plunge. But yeah, it all started just simply with me realizing that I could take advantage of this platform. That the idea of streaming myself playing a video game would be cool. I guess a little mini story. I was playing a game called Infamous on PlayStation 3. I'm not sure if you were around in that era.
I know of the game. I've never played it, though.
And so I'm playing this game, and we lived with a lot of guys. I moved out on my own when I was 18, and I'm living with a bunch of guys. We're living in our own apartment, and I always had somebody watching me game. And I started falling in love because I was always a gaming voyeur as a kid. And as a kid, I always loved when people watched me game. Well, one day, somebody comes in the room and is watching me play this game, Infamous, and I do one of the coolest things I've ever done in a video game. And the fact that somebody was in the room watching me, I remember freaking out about it. Like, yes, somebody else witnessed this. Yes. Like, all of my hard work to make that the coolest looking thing possible, and I didn't know they were in the room. All of a sudden, I found out that somebody saw it. And the excitement that I felt that someone actually was able to witness this thing that I was doing for myself. The whole time, I was just making it cool for me. And then I found out my buddy was watching behind me. It made me go, this is, like, I could do this. Like, this would be really enjoyable. Like, and my style of gaming and what I get out of gaming, I feel like is just as enjoyable for the person watching me. I think that was that realization is what pushed me towards Twitch.
With how you stream now, with what you've chosen, like how did you come to what you stream now? Because right now, as we record in September, I know you've been talking about changing up the schedule a little bit, but right now it's a mixture of Animal Crossing, Stardew Valley, and Legend of Zelda, a version of Zelda, whether it be like Wind Waker from GameCube or some of the classic games from like Game Boy Advance or from Game Boy or older. How did you come to select those games as your kind of core games to really kick things off for streaming?
Well, when I finally got the computer and all that, I knew this whole time I wanted to stream Nintendo. I knew that. That's just one of the biggest things that I thought about over the years was Nintendo content. I'm a Nintendo baby. So aside from that, I'd say what really pushed me was testing the waters. I started off the first week playing a bunch of different games. My actual first positive morning vibes was Sonic Adventure. Old school kickback. I had it on Steam. They re-released it on Steam. And I also did Sonic Adventure 2. And one day I just decided to turn on Animal Crossing. You know, it's not like I played the game randomly. I had been playing it for years.
Mm-hmm.
But one morning I was like, this game is chill and, you know, positive in the sense that it's cute and just fluffy, and I'm just going to turn this game on. It was seriously happenstance as far as Animal Crossing goes. And it blew up. Animal Crossing turned into a thing. And as far as Stardew Valley goes, I wanted something that fit Animal Crossing. I feel like a lot of streamers struggle transitioning games I'm not sure how much Twitch you've watched, but it's a common thing where if you get popular in one game or one genre, switching out of that is tough.
Mm-hmm.
So Stardew Valley came around because of that. I said, what's something that I could play that I love that is close to home to Animal Crossing, so that I don't lose my viewer base, and that I could still do something that I want to do. And I looked towards Stardew Valley, and boom, another unexpected success. And of course, Zelda, because I'm HylianDescent. I love Zelda.
One of the things that I enjoy with your streams, and that if people come join your streams, is that you take the time not only to play the game, but you're always responding to chat. And I think that's one of the things where when I'm watching people, and it's, I think the games that you play currently, with the exception of sometimes in Zelda when you're really having like a boss battle or you're doing something that requires concentration, the games lend themselves to where you can take a moment and look at what's going on in chat and talk to chat. And I mean, sometimes the chat is going crazy and going incredibly quick. And it's one of the things that I love is that you are so responsive to what, like, questions that we have, or questions that are, or conversations that are going on in chat. And I find that, like, that is just one of those things that I enjoy getting to be a part of when I'm in your stream.
I appreciate that. I think it's one of my traits as a streamer. I think it's one of my strong suits. There we go. Better worded. I think that's something that I also enjoy the most. One of my favorite parts of being a streamer is interacting with chat. It brings such a different dynamic to gaming. It's something I've never experienced in my life, being able to interact with anywhere from one other to, tons and tons of other people who enjoy the game that I'm playing just as much, and some who even don't, who stop in asking awesome questions like, what is this game and why are you talking to animals? You know how great it is to answer those types of questions.
I guess the other thing is that, like you mentioned at the beginning, is that, like, the community, like, kind of built itself, and I feel like there is this transition from, so I kind of picture it not like that you're at the head, but more like I guess I'd equate it to like a round table, like a Arthurian round table.
Right.
Like, you may be like you're the person that I got introduced to, but then in chat you're always talking about, and you're always promoting, and that's another wonderful thing about you as a streamer, and you being on Twitch, is that you're promoting other people. And I try to go to those other people, and it's wonderful because the people that you recommend, or the people that are your mods that also do their streams, are incredible in their own right. Like, and it's almost like this big extended family that, for me, because I found you first, it sprouted off of like your channel, and now I find myself in multiple other people's channels that I'd never know of, playing games that maybe I wouldn't be interested in, but I'm getting to be a part of their chat, and their chat feels very similar to the chat and the community that you have created. And I think that's, I'm not going to say like they like, because I don't know their backgrounds. Like, I can't say like they started because you were streaming, but their community seems to have taken part, like parts of your community have gone into these other streamers, and it's made like an impact. Like, I can see like just a good positive vibe in each of these other communities, and I think it's just a testament to everybody that like is in your chat and streams, and just the people that get something out of it is just so incredibly powerful.
I appreciate that. It really is. My envisionment, or my vision rather, for Hyrule Gaming Group was pretty simple. it started off just on the idea that we started a community that could help promote and grow other streamers as a streamer or a content creator. I don't even want to say just streamers. We had an idea that we would start on Twitch, but musicians, artists, whatever, let's create an area where we can help you get exposure, but also expose ourselves while we're at it. I feel like it's just a very simple, I'm not the first one that's thought of this. And we started off just as a gaming community on Discord. That was actually how I started. I wasn't streaming. I had a few people who streamed on my community leaders team, but nothing was big. And I say it sprouted itself because when we finally hit Twitch 6 months ago, the community it blossomed. People, not even just from Discord, other streamers caught on to what we were doing, caught on to the positive vibes, to the environment that was being kind of formed and helped. And that's why I say the community built itself, because I couldn't have just done it myself. It took countless people stopping in and acknowledging what was going on and then helping to push it along. And I won't lie to you, it's kind of cheesy to say this, but this is something I learned from my hip hop roots. There is a song even by A Tribe Called Quest called Push It Along. And it was about pretty much how the word of mouth and about how pushing those artists that you love, whether it be, word of mouth or over the internet now in our new day and age, getting them known and helping push that stuff that you love that has influences you or inspires you, how that is just amazing. The idea of it. And that's traditional style hip hop and underground hip hop. A lot of it is about that. They build off of each other. There's these little communities that push and grow each other, or help each other grow rather, through the same kind of thing I think that we have going on here. Same idea. Not just scratching of backs back and forth, but also just genuine kindness. Genuine people coming out and just saying, I'm going to help this person grow. I'm going to drop them a follow. I'm going to check out their content. All the way to the supporters and the lurkers and the people who take time to actually check out the people we shout out. And it catches like wildfire. It seriously caught like wildfire. It's nuts. I expected to be streaming to 10 people right now. I expected to have a long struggle journey to even get any kind of recognition or acknowledgement on Twitch. And to see this community turn into what it has in such a short amount of time has even blown my own mind. Like I still wake up every day like, wow. Like, this is nuts. I think we're on to something.
Do you think that one of the main draws is the community and the positive vibes and the combination of the community, the positive vibes, and then the games that you're playing as well, especially leaning more towards like the Animal Crossing Stardew Valley, or even when you play Harvest Moon, leaning more into that side, because those games, I mean, with the exception of Stardew Valley, where you're going into like the mines and using the sword on occasion, they're more games that are just making your way through the day.
Yeah, I agree. I have to say you're on point there, and I agree with where you're going with that. I think it started with the games, or I think the games helped a ton, and I think that they help keep things going in that direction, if that makes sense, because naturally, if you are at all in tune with those types of games, there's a reason. There's just a reason, whether it be you wanted a break from every game, you're killing something. Every game, you're killing some guy because of something, for some reason, whether it's experience, money, a quest. And I think that's one of the first draws to Animal Crossing for me personally. I picked that game up when I was very young, and it was so unique. Oh, you mean that I don't spend all day shooting this blaster at things or bopping their heads, throwing Bowser off of a cliff. None of that. It was me just living my life. And I think that, I think it has a lot to do with it. I feel like Animal Crossing itself could be a huge benefactor to, if not the continued growth of the community where we've gotten right now. I don't think I would be anywhere without the Animal Crossing fandom. They're pretty awesome. And I would like to note I've been a part of the fandom for a long time because I've been mingling in the Animal Crossing community for about 10 years. So seeing it on Twitch and seeing it just as beautiful on Twitch as anywhere else I've seen is a pretty cool thing.
Absolutely. And it still blows my mind that, like, I had no idea people could stream games from the 3DS, and to see people playing New Leaf or even the original GameCube Animal Crossing with that HD like texture pack, like that blew me away. And I as a Animal Crossing person who bought a GameCube solely for Animal Crossing, I'm so thrilled for March of 2020 for New Horizons, because that's just going to open it up even more.
It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of fun. Too much fun.
Last question about Twitch before we wrap up the episode is, where do you see Hyrule Gaming Group going? Where do you see yourself going in the future as far as being on Twitch and being a streamer? Because right now, for people that are listening and haven't checked out your stream, you also work on top of doing this streaming.
Yeah, so I do kind of have a battle plan. And here this fall, going into winter, I plan to pretty much go full-time into creating content, which is like a little scary. It's definitely soon to be thinking about making a living, and I'm worried that it could maybe change my perspective on creating content if I'm not making it solely for fun.
Mm-hmm.
So things that I've thought of, thoughts that have popped up in my brain, but I'm going to go with it. I'm very passionate about this, and I think that I can conquer whatever kind of trials that I come across. So the plan is to go not just full-time as a streamer, but like on Twitch, but off Twitch here coming at least by winter, if not sooner. And aside from that, I see Hyrule Gaming Group continuing their growth. I see us, I would like us to turn more into an entity of pushing all forms of content. I want to see us go even further into that rabbit hole of pushing artists, graphic designers, musicians, whatever reason that you come to our community to find maybe a little bit of light, maybe a couple extra eyes or ears, and maybe cultivate some relationships, which is the key thing. And I say that to people, if you're just coming to Hyrule Gaming Group to get an extra pair of eyes, you're just doing yourself a disservice, because this community is so beautiful. If you take a little bit of time to get to know it, it's going to do nothing but give back to you. And so I feel like it even has its own defense system in that way. Whereas, sure, you're going to have the average person who might come and just want to get a few extra people and views and subscribers, and then they'll be on their way. But you're going to find true benefits here if you put the effort into the community, because the community will put the effort back into you. And I'm sure you've seen it yourself. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So I want us to continue that. I want us to keep our identity as people who help promote other content creators, no matter how big we get. That's one of my biggest goals. And to be honest, I just want to keep conquering Twitch. I don't feel like I'm not going to stop. I won't stop until there is as many people as possible enjoying my content. And I don't say that at all that I won't be happy or satisfied with even just one, because I really do like to make that clear. It's not about the amount of people, but for me, I do have a goal, and my goal is to keep growing. I don't know if I don't want there to ever be a ceiling, but I feel like most people feel that way, right?
Absolutely.
Right. So that is my goal. My goal is to just keep going, keep rocking out Twitch, and hoping that no matter what kind of changes I do, As you mentioned, we have a schedule change coming. I'm not going to stray away from our current games, but I will be down the road. You better believe I'm going to slowly mix our content up and always keep it fresh. And that it's going to be about challenging myself, but also keeping in touch with the community at the same time. It's going to be tough. It's all about a balance, I feel.
Absolutely, because as you said, if with other content creators where they've played that same game and then trying to break out, it can be tough. And like, I know that there was one specific content creator, they had played like The Sims 4 for so long that when they started straying away into other games, like it was definitely like that shock of I'm here for you in The Sims 4. I'm not here for these other games you're trying. And I feel, at least with what you've been doing, and you've been having the same ones, but I feel like the exit point as far as to get into those other games is going to be easier, because you've been talking about it, you've been preparing the community, and you have been playing other games, like especially when you play like the different Zelda games, they're completely different. They're not the same as we had talked about previously. So it's already getting into, well, let's do something else. Let's try this. Let's see how this works.
Right. And that was kind of our goal. I say we because I do have Beatles 420. Shout out to him. He's constantly one of our mods, and he's one of my back of the house guys. And a lot of my powwows, it talks about how do we find that perfect balance. And we slowly drifted into Stardew. We've touched a couple games here and there, and we stepped away from some of them that weren't biting as much. But more importantly, I think it's about creating a community that's here for you and not just for your game. And I don't think that you have all the power over that, but I think with enough, in a sense, I use this word, but not in a bad way, but enough conditioning to let your community know that you do have plans and that you do have a direction that you want to take the channel. And one of the things I haven't talked about, but one of our biggest goals is we want to turn the Hyrule Gaming Group into somewhat of a television style broadcast stream where we have different time slots and you come and get different content and even different casters at different times. And down the road, if we could conquer that, if we could achieve that goal, then we could even further that idea that when you come to the stream, you come for the content creator. You don't come for the game, because at any time that game could be switched up. That person could be switched up. And you might, if you're looking for HylianDescent, you might have to come for that morning time slot. But at nighttime, it might not be HylianDescent. It might be League of Legends with Blink. And I feel like that idea is what I've been trying to lightly nudge with my mix-ups, with my playing a different Zelda here and there. You've acknowledged, we've managed to mix in a couple different games. And if you look at my backlog, we've had a few weeks where we played Mortal Kombat, we played Mega Man. Like, we really did try to mix it up as we've grown, because I do have a vision where there's more than just, let's say, Animal Crossing for this example. But
absolutely, it's the vision that you have is very similar to several of the tabletop role-playing game streams that I follow, where they do have those time slots. And 12 o'clock to 3 o'clock is Dungeons and Dragons, but 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock is Star Wars, and they do it every day, 7 days a week. There's always some kind of content being made, not always with the same streamer, but with like a different person running the game, different players, and they do it for 13 weeks. Then the game is over, change it up. So
that's
yeah, definitely something that I think, especially with the number of streamers that I feel that would participate, is definitely something I could see doable for Hyrule Gaming Group.
That's awesome. I think anytime I bring it up, we've gotten really good feedback. So I think that down the road, a future talk, if you will, but down the road, it's definitely something we're going to consider. But I think that's where Hyrule Gaming Group's going. I think our journey is just beginning, and those are some of the directions I'd like to take it. But in the least, just know that we're trying to do more, constantly doing everything I can to keep the content fresh, alive, and dynamic. I don't ever want to hit a point where someone comes to the channel and says, oh, this again, or this is a little stale, or yeah. And so I do my best. I do my best.
Now, for those who have listened to this podcast episode and they would like to find you on the internet, whether it be Twitch or elsewhere, what are the best places to do so?
Well, on Twitch, we are twitch.tv/Hyrule Gaming Group, Hyrule Gaming Group. And then on Twitter, you can find us at HyruleGG. And it's the same thing on Instagram and any other form of social media. It's just at Hyrule Gaming Group. You can use the hashtag. Our community is really starting to come forward with the hashtag Hyrule Gaming or HyruleGG. HyruleGG. That's our little shortcut, if you will. And then you could also find us on Discord, but all that information would be mostly provided on the Twitter. So the Twitter is definitely where my main hub and my main source of information is right now.
Awesome. Well, I just want to say thank you again, Josh, for taking the time out of your schedule to come on and talk to me about everything. It was a total blast. And again, just love being a part of your stream.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And the opportunity to come chat with you, Tails, and definitely had a lot of fun and a lot of good questions. And, you made me think throughout the whole podcast, and as far as our growth in this community and what we're accomplishing, I'd have to say that networking was one of the biggest benefactors. Meeting people like you, meeting Club Tortimer. Shout out to Club Tortimer, a group of Nintendo and Animal Crossing streamers on Twitch. They pulled me under their wing, and they've helped us blossom more than anybody else, I think, at least as far as Twitch communities go. So I like to shout them out too, but to you as well, to people who are doing the same thing we are on a different front here in the podcast world. So I appreciate you.
Thank you for listening to Tales from the Fandom. Subscribe to us on iTunes or your podcast app of choice. Follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/talesfromthefandom to see photos, links, leave feedback, and check out upcoming guests. If you'd like to be a guest, email David at talesfromthefandom@gmail.com.